Lunar Nights here. With my flak run slowly working its way through the editing room, I decided to tackle a question a few people have been asking for in my recent videos. Green Earth's Air Fortress is one of the most iconic maps in the game. It's dramatic, it's tense, and it's all around just a fun battle. Eagle normally leads the pride of the Green Earth air fleet here, but what if he didn't? What if Eagle was out sick that day, and Drake, the naval expert that suffers massive air debuffs, was the commander in charge? Let's find out. You know the drill with these by now, so I'll jump right in by soaring forward. Normally when you play this map, you have a day-to-day bonus of 15% firepower and 10% defense, which is huge for air units and critical against a strong commander like Hawk. In contrast, Drake has minus 30% firepower to his air units, so overall, I'm down 45% power and 10% defense to the norm for this mission. Yeah, this is going to be painful. I'm definitely worried about my odds, especially against Hawk with his boosted stats and global damage CO power. I have global damage as well, but Hawk can easily repair that with his own. Several of his key units are also on cities, granting him repairs there too. As weird as this sounds, I think the standard version of this mission is going to be harder than the hard campaign version, because at least there I'd have a few naval units to work with. The run starts, and I decide to take the normal approach to this mission, carrying out true strategic finesse.
So it begins.
Alright, yeah, I'm just moving forward to try and brute force it like you traditionally would. Despite saying that, it's not a reckless charge, and I will be using typical tactics to negate damage. Starting with moving to the edge of Hawk's range to let his fighters and B-copters come to me so that I can ambush them for the first strike advantage. That first attack on his fighter is going to tell me a lot about how this run will go. And well, alright, big moment here, this will tell me a lot. 38%. I'm really worried about that counterattack. Ooh, that's not what I wanted to see. It could be worse, though. It could be worse. Maybe a high roll will kill it. Nope, definitely did not. Yep, you get the picture. Even with first strike, I'm using those nerf darts again. It takes 3 attacks from my fighters just to bring down one of his, and I take heavy damage in the process. B-copters aren't much better, but at least I have more of them to work with. Normally B-copters are all about who attacks first, but in my case, even attacking first leaves us both at 6 HP. By the time I'm engaged with Hawk's second air wave, he's able to pop his power, which paired with that second wave really stings. I use mine on the next turn to try and even the odds, but the problem is my weakened units can't punch through his forces like I need to. Usually his aggressive units are more of an inconvenience than anything, but here they are a serious danger, and I find I just don't have the damage output to even take them all out. The B-copters don't matter much because they can't hurt my bombers, but his fighters are terrifying, especially since one of them survives with high health. I have to resort to blockading it in and hoping it will either run out of missiles or fuel before it can chase me down. This leaves the fortress itself, which is incredibly well defended against a frontal attack between the cannons and rockets, either of which can neuter my offensive. Here is where Eagle's superpower usually comes in clutch by granting extra movement for destroying key assets and dodging dangerous attacks. As anticipated, Drake's power is completely useless here. Its tiny amount of damage is immediately repaired, and the fuel loss means nothing. It isn't long before I meet my end. Now that I know a direct attack with Drake is impossible, it's time to start mixing up tactics. On my next run, I try a blind blitz, sacking the majority of my force as fodder to rush my bombers forward before Hawk's power can drain them, since last time it was taking me 3 turns to destroy a cannon. This is partially inspired by the speedrun strat for this mission, which involves letting Hawk deal first strike damage to you so that you will be able to reach the fortress at full health and use the double turn power early. A full health Eagle bomber destroys a cannon in 1 turn, so I was hoping this would be a similar experience even if I couldn't move twice. As it turns out, even at full health, a Drake bomber only does 66 points of damage to it, 66. Even Cullen does 95. I also find out the hard way that Hawks fighters one-shot my bombers, and this strategy turns into a resounding failure. But I take a few lessons from it. The first of these is that more than ever, I need to protect my bombers and ensure every one of them reaches the fortress, because even if they're terrible, I need every little bit of damage I can get. This means that as scary as Hawk's advance force is, I need to find a way to deal with it. It would also help if I can focus my bombers onto one side of the fortress, because the numbers will be important for soaking fire until one can slip through. Think of this like the trench run from Star Wars, where if I can get one bomber with good health behind the fortress, I'll be able to do some serious damage. My new strategy is to keep my units packed tighter than ever and run them down one of the map borders. This means more travel time for half of Hawk's units and a tighter defensive wedge for me. Unlike before, when I would save my superpower, from here on I will be using my basic power as often as I can. This is because Drake's power has a secondary effect besides the damage that is far more useful to me now. It cuts my enemy's fuel supply in half, and when air or naval units run out of fuel, they are destroyed. Since I'm not strong enough to defeat Hawk's assault force, I'm hoping gravity will do it for me if I can survive that long. That is easier said than done. The scariest unit is still his fighters, and sometimes he will join them for fuel, ruining my strategy. Sometimes, though, I get lucky and they will run out, which is the only times I've managed to take out his force. Fun fact here, many people forget that you can land 2 copters on cruisers to use them as a transport and refuel. The AI just about never does this, but here Hawk does. Amusingly though, he never lets them onload afterwards, so rather than redeploying fresh refueled copters to harass me, he lets the ship sink with the copters still aboard. Normally that would be a huge win for me, but truthfully, it has almost no bearing on this run since the cruiser itself is scarier than the copters. I try a few different variations on this defensive wedge strategy, one of which is to pull my units back to ensure that Hawk's units run out of fuel. But despite how effective this proves to be for destroying his forces, it's still a loss for me because by the time I pull my forces forward again to attack the fortress, which is at this point unscathed, I'm now too low on fuel to win either since I can barely maneuver. This is without even taking into account that it still doesn't feel like I have the firepower to even break through. My most successful run at this point was to split the wedge close to the fortress, sending my bombers forward while my remaining units occupied Hawk's offense until they ran out of fuel. This best run destroys 2 of the rockets and 3 cannons. I might have gotten a 4th cannon with a different play at the end, but it's still a firm loss. Something I've mostly grazed over so far, and only addressed at the end here, is fuel. I mentioned Eagle's day-to-day boosting his firepower and defense, but what I didn't list then is that he has a 3rd passive ability where his air units use less fuel than other commanders. Normally this doesn't come into play too much because you'll have access to APCs and airports, but on this mission it becomes a serious limiter. In my runs, it's always a major concern that cuts my mobility and forces me to think more carefully about every move, which is good in a strategy game, but it has me wondering if it's even possible to beat this mission without Eagle's fuel bonus. Even when sparing every bomber and joining them, I'm still having planes fall out of the sky. If Eagle's fuel bonus alone is a limiter for this run, then it's absolutely impossible for Drake. I need to test this, and to do so, I return to the map with another commander, Max. Max is a great alternative to Eagle for this test. He has 20% boosted power for direct units, but no defense bonus, making his day-to-day bonus comparable to Eagle's when it comes to this mission. His CO powers boost power and movement, but lack that critical double move Eagle has. Most importantly though, he has those similarities, but lacks the fuel bonus in question. I approach Max's run like I normally would Eagle's, and right from the start I have to say that it was a blast. It's incredibly neat seeing Orange Star forces on this mission, and even though the story hasn't changed, it feels like it has and even fits the world because Orange Star has a reputation for aiding the other nations. Plus, Max never gets a mission where he goes to help someone else, just like the other Orange Star commanders. Max himself really does play like Eagle here. He hits slightly harder, but also takes more counterattack damage, which balances it out well. Hawk's advanced force falls like it feels it should. and Max's power lends itself to this mission even though it's not as wild as Eagle's. Most satisfying though is that his bombers hit like bombers should, which just feels amazing after so many attempts with Drake's wet noodle bombers. The fortress falls with relative ease, and I even destroy one cannon with a B-copter. Fuel was definitely a concern, but it shows it is possible. My next step is to test the mission with Colin, who has 10% reduced offense and normal defense. His CO powers are even more useless than Drake's on this mission, since I have no properties. Right from the initial confrontation, I can feel he is stronger than Drake. I can reliably two-shot Hawk's air units with my equivalents, rather than needing to use 3 attacks, even if I am straddling the 50% line when doing so. The long and short of this test is that I was playing a bit sloppy on my Colin runs because I was pretty tired and I didn't beat the fortress, but I got a sense for how the mission plays with him. I've run this mission so many times at this point in different ways that I have a good feel on how it goes, and my assessment is that with near-perfect plays and lucky RNG rolls, Colin should be able to beat the mission just barely. I'm not 100% on this point, but I'm confident calling it plausible. If Colin is only just plausible, then Drake seems impossible, as that 10% damage reduction seems to be the line of no return. Being down 30% means it takes 3 turns to destroy key units like fighters and rockets, which means much more time wasting fuel and being exposed to attacks. Though I've mostly talked about how scary Hawk's fighters are, it's actually his rockets paired with well-placed cannons that always doom the run. These suckers are impossible to deal with without taking serious damage and losing precious fuel. Hawk also has a nasty habit of moving them over a tile to cover a cannon like this, which is effectively a guaranteed loss whenever it happens. So as of this point, I want to call the challenges a no and say that Drake cannot beat this mission. It's just fundamentally built in such a way that bars his victory. That said, this is Lunar Nights, and I'm rather stubborn. Time to take another break and come back fresh. When I returned, I had only one strategy left to try, my final big effort. It's a combination of previous failed strategies, and I'd currently skipped it up to this point because it seemed too far-fetched to have a chance. And frankly, it felt rather silly to even try considering I'd tested elements of it before with dramatic failure. As the run starts, I move my air combat units forward to meet Hawk's first wave and deal with them using first strikes as best I can. I'll then pull them back next turn so Hawk's second wave has to travel further to reach me. My bombers sit where they start, losing 5 daily fuel, but nothing to movement. This is the cornerstone of this strategy. I'm trying to squeeze every drop of fuel out of my units while maximizing how much Hawk spends. I can't beat him, but I know I can drain him with my power to ensure he falls out of the sky, though I also know I can't do so by moving back and forth without meeting the same fate. By simply not moving, I hope to squeeze 1 or 2 more turns of movement out of my bombers in the end. I pair this with my defensive wedge tactic since that has proven to be my most effective way to reach the fortress in a healthy fashion. With a normal commander, none of this is necessary, but Drake absolutely needs it. The wedge also serves to waste more of Hawk's fuel by making him have to move more since his southern units need to travel north and even the northern ones waste time trying to fight through the block. I come into range of the first turret with my bombers as healthy as I can reasonably expect them to be, and slightly more fuel than usual. Slightly. I've saved maybe like 10 tiles of fuel with this, a normally insignificant amount, and I still have a lot of movement to go. Still, this is the absolute best case scenario arrival for me, better than any other run so far. The real challenge has always been the fortress itself, and it's no different now. But hey, I have more fighters than usual. That's pretty cool, right? They're totally going to help in some way considering they can only attack air and there's no air units left. Right? It's a shame my bombers can't siphon fuel out of them. I send 1 bomber and 2 B-copters south, while everything else focuses on a forward push. With more fuel to bolster my force, this easily becomes my strongest attempt, securing the destruction of every cannon except for 2. For the first time this entire challenge, I feel like I might be onto a strategy that actually has a chance of victory. I continue to approach it this way, making small tweaks, memorizing patterns, and perfecting my movements to maximize my fuel efficiency. Each time, I find myself in this similar spot where I'm close, but there's always 2 or 3 cannons left. If I only had a day or 2 more of fuel. If only I had just a bit more firepower. If only. These are the thoughts I find myself having. There are a few points to note here that allow me to even get this far. I've already gone into detail about how I reach the fortress with more fuel, and even extra B-copters sometimes. When I make my big push, I join fighters together to form a healthy one, which in turn attracts a shot from the cannons that would otherwise hit a bomber. The B-copters are partially joined up for a similar bait role, but this time it's for the enemy's rockets. I discovered a pattern that when faced with a low-fuel bomber or a stable B-copter, even though it can destroy either option in one shot, and the bomber should be the higher priority target normally, the AI sees how low its fuel is and targets the B-copter instead. This is actually a decently smart move in normal play because that B-copter would be more threatening than the bomber about to fall out of the sky in a turn or 2. But I can abuse it here to guard my bombers for 1 extra turn. Still, I fall short. But then, at around 2 in the morning after repeated attempts, it happens. The stars align, and I manage to get bombers with just enough fuel and firepower in place around the final 4 cannons. These 4 are a major pain because they set Hawk's anti-air free, but now I can destroy them all in one mighty swoop. With literally the last of my fuel before multiple bombers hit 0, these cannons fall and victory is assured. Wow, when I first took on this challenge, I initially thought it would be an easy one that would make for a quick video. And then after a few attempts, it seemed completely impossible. So I thought I was going to be ending this with a call for new tactics ideas from you. To workshop my strategy this far, that something ridiculous and seemingly impossible becomes actually possible was really fun. And let me tell you, even at 2 a.m., the hype over winning was very real. Anyways, now we know that Drake can indeed beat Eagle's Sea Fortress mission. Have a wonderful day.